Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another show with me, Jacques, of Loving the Game. And tonight I've got Brent Graham from Good for the Game, amongst many other things. Pretty busy guy, sports, betting blogger, and a big punter of note. And a gentleman that I got to know over the last year or so, through a lot of rugby chats and stuff. And someone that's made me part of his regular Monday night show, especially when my team, the Bulls, do badly, then I seem to be on top of the list to be invited. So, yeah, welcome, Brent. How are you doing?
Jacques, excellent, man. Great to be on your show, and good work. I've been following your shows. You've done a lot, and you're cramming quite a bit in already. I know it is lockdown and all, but people don't realize quite a bit of work goes into putting the show on, and then you've got to hope that everything comes together. So certainly good, great to talk about rugby. And yeah, certainly from my side, you mentioned sports bet. I mean, you could imagine I haven't had a sports bet now in about a month. So yeah, it's really, and I mean, all of my, let's call it sports betting mates are in exactly the same position. I mean, some of them have turned to things like e-gaming and betting on what I would consider ridiculous things. I'm just taking a view of holding back and waiting for the real sport to begin, and using this as a time to maybe recharge batteries, get a few other things going.
Yeah. I mean, normally we were actually chatting about this off air, where you would normally be hosting the show, and tonight the tables are turned, so you could just sit back and relax and just tell us your story. And I mean, on that point, just give us a bit of a background. Who exactly is Brent Graham? What do you do? Where do you come from?
Yeah, well, actually, born in Cape Town as a youngster, but lived there only until I was about 4 years old. Then my dad actually worked in England for a year, so I went there. So I came back. So I basically went to school in Johannesburg all my life. I'm still staying in Johannesburg. I probably stay about 15 kilometers away from where I grew up as a kid. So I went to a primary school that only had soccer, but I've been a rugby fan certainly from early days. I was a massive rugby fan in the 80s, particularly. We're so spoiled these days, maybe not during lockdown, but we're spoiled these days with the amount of sport we get to watch. In those days, we were obviously, for political reasons, there were sanctions and we were under isolation. And you really appreciated what sport you got to watch. And it's uncanny. I can remember scores from test matches when I was 8 years old in 1980. And yet I can't tell you a score of a Tri-Nations match last year. In those days, as a youngster, you appreciated it. You got up at 4 a.m. to watch. But basically, I've always been into sport, but I've always had a betting element to me as well. I've loved betting. I used to drive up to Sun City for the Nedbank Challenge Golf to have a bet on the golf when I was a student with mates. And it's always been something I've been fascinated with. And it's had a big impact on my life, in the sense that the more you bet, the less it becomes about which team you support, and the more it becomes about where your money's going.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll probably touch on that during the show, but there was probably a turning point for me when sports betting became legal in this country, where I started really focusing on it. I started Good for the Game, I lie. I started a site called Sports Review in 2005, writing sports betting previews with a partner of mine, Brendan. And then in 2009, we had a couple of other ventures. I had a venture with MoneyWeb called Sporting Web, and eventually Good for the Game started in 2009 with Chris Sturdy. And he's really the main engine behind that side. I don't do as much writing on that as I used to, but we're passionate about sport. We're passionate about betting, and our rugby following is, from a betting perspective, there's sites there with much bigger followings than us. But from a betting perspective on rugby, I mean, our forum gets so much action. But that really is a hobby to me. My main job, I actually work in the fuel industry, developing new service stations. So that's my bread and butter, and anything sports betting, and that is over and above that.
Okay, that's cool. I wanted to ask you, basically, I mean, you were touching on it, the whole betting thing and how you got into it. What was the initial, catalyst that got you intrigued with sports betting? Where did it develop from?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I remember at high school, I'd be the guy in the class who would run a book, that type of thing, over like Dukakis against Bush, I think it was, in the US president elections. I managed to run myself a book where I made money either side, that type of thing.
Wow.
So I always had that drive. My dad wasn't a gambler at all, but he used to take a 1 rand pick six every week. He used to cycle up to the tote in Randburg and put it on. So I used to go with him. But he wasn't a gambler. But my grandfather was a big punter. He used to love playing the horses and that. And I was always fascinated by it. Obviously, sports betting was still I mean, in South Africa, it was actually legal at that time, unless you went up to the Sun City or something like that. So it was really, really small. But I guess it was with the advent of online betting, which really started in the I would say since the mid-90s when it became legal, I've been playing. But the fact is, when betting went online, it just changed the game totally. Now you could sit in the comfort of your lounge. You could sit while you were in a meeting. You could be in a board meeting, and you could you could be playing a bet. So it just changed the whole dynamic. But I would say it only came probably when I was in my mid-20s, because that's when it sort of became legal in the country. Before that, I was a fan and not a punter.
Well, okay, we'll get back to some other betting stories later on. But I want to, obviously, the main reason for, loving the game is obviously to chat about rugby mostly. Because, I'm a big rugby fan and supporter. And over the years that I've been on social media, Twitter more specifically, I've gotten to know a lot of guys like you because of my love for rugby. And that's, so when I came up with the idea for this show, I thought, man, yes, I want to, get to know guys like you better, because normally it's a matter of, you come online, you have a chat, and everybody goes on with their lives again. It's never really a moment. And a lot of the time, there's a lot of the guys that I've spoken to since now, and I mean, you are one of them. We've only ever met like this, we've never ever met face to face in the real sense of the word. And that's why I think this is a great opportunity for me to get to know you, but also for other people that know you, because on your social platforms, people will probably get word of what we're doing, and they're also in the same boat as me. So big focus tonight obviously is rugby. And there I can see you wearing a Western Province jersey, so that already tells me you clearly a Western Province supporter. Because I'd be very shocked if you're telling me you're a Cheetah supporter wearing a Province jersey.
No, definitely a Province
supporter.
No. So first of all, what you're saying is so true. This lockdown is a great opportunity to do things like this, where you can actually spend a bit more time, because everything is so rushed. I know even with my shows that I do, my betting shows, we're rushing to finish, and then I've got to rush to get the podcasts up, and you're just rushing the whole time. And here's an opportunity. Yeah, okay, I still somehow seem to run out of time in the lockdown, but that's just because I think I do too much buggering around. But it's an opportunity to go into some of the things that maybe you don't have time to do. So look, if I had to divide my rugby life, I'd have to say we call it pre-punting and post-punting. So if I could go back pre-punting, yes, I was born in the Cape. My dad was a ardent Western Province supporter, and I was brought up as a Western Province supporter. My early memories, I was born in 72. My early memories of rugby came in 1979, was my first real memory I've got. 15-all Currie Cup final. Robbie Blair and Mornay du Plessis they were sort of my favorite players at Province. My dad was a massive Robbie Blair fan. And of course, what did Naas Boer to do? He kicked, I think, he kicked all 15 points for Northerns. I think probably a couple of drop goals and a few penalties. And he got them the draw. And that was a year that, even as a youngster, Province should have won that Currie Cup. Naas Boer, I developed nothing that's carried on over the years, but Naas at the time was my worst player, because Naas was that guy who could single-handedly keep the Bulls in a game. And those are my earliest memories, sort of 1979 with Mornay du Plessis. I think that was the famous kissing your sister Currie Cup, And that's where I was hooked on Western Province. And I had great memories. Let's face it, it was Northern Transvaal and Western Province in the 80s that had so many epic battles. And every now and again, you would get an Natal or something that would come in. But those two sides really had battles. And all the way up to, I think it was 1997. The one story I always tell was, I think it was the Western Province against Free State. And there was that dramatic ending to the game where it looked like Free State had scored in the corner. I think it was Helgaard Muller, or I forget. I think it was Muller passing to someone else. And in the end, it was the days before TMO, but the game was actually called back. And we'd just got cell phones at work in those days. And I'd been so on at the guys about Province that I quickly switched my cell phone off because I thought we'd lost the game. And then I went back to the TV, and my dad said, "No, don't worry, they're given a forward pass." And Province won. So I quickly switched my cell phone back on. But that was a sort of passion that I had for Province. I was a massive Western Province fan. And a lot of the favorite players that I had was from the 80s and the 90s.
And you mentioned your favorite players. Who stood out for you specifically? And do you have maybe a current favorite player, or is the guys back in the day you just can't compare.
I always struggle to compare the eras a little bit because I think they were so different. I mean, pre-professionalism and even myself, I played a sort of club rugby in the 90s, and where I started like losing. I was a decent player, but I was a lazy player. I loved playing the games. I wasn't the hardest trainer in the world. And suddenly, when we went professional, all of a sudden, instead of training, say, 2 nights a week with your club, they now wanted you there 4 nights a week. And it was that type of thing. And it was that, the game just changed. Guys became more physical than that. But a lot of my early memories, some of those players, I mean, I was a big Mornay du Plessis fan. I really enjoyed him. Probably through the influence of my dad, I was a Robbie Blair. Other guys who played for Province like Carl du Plessis. Neil Berger was a winger who, I mean, that guy's legs were unbelievable. And he scored some fascinating tries. And once again, he was around at the same time as like a Ray Mort. And Ray Mort was a great player, but because I was a Province boy, it was almost a bit like Nas Bird as well. I would like be against Ray Mort because I wanted, I wanted Neil Berger to be the best. But my best player of probably a little bit later than those guys, but my favorite player of all time is Tiaan Strauss. I absolutely love Tiaan Strauss. I played 8th man myself. He played just the sort of game I loved. I mean, it broke my heart at the time when he did go off and ultimately, play for the Wallabies. But for me, he was a guy he never really got his fair crack, maybe, or at Springbok level. But for me, Tiaan Strauss was my favorite player and absolutely loved him. So if I had to look back at that sort of era, Strauss would get the nod. But there were just so many great players that I enjoyed. Cullis Scholtz, and you'll notice they're all Western Province players because in those days, as a lighty growing up, you just focused on your team. You weren't too worried about anybody else.
Yeah, it's actually nice that you mentioned Cullis Scholtz's name there. I mean, yes, I remember the rivalries, like you mentioned just now, Western Province and Northern Transvaal back in the day when they were called Northern Transvaal still. That to me, that was the one rivalry, but within that you had the Nas Botha Cullis Scholtz rivalry. That was just insane. And I find myself lately kind of wondering a lot what's happened to him. It's funny how nobody ever remembers him that well. And I mean, he was the big guy for Western Province in those years. He was I wouldn't compare him with Nas, but he was their Nas Botha basically. In my eyes, that was like the only 2 guys on the field ever when those 2 teams got to play each other.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he played a fullback and he used to kick for posts and stuff like that as well. He was good. No, I mean, I got many memories of those days. I mean, there really were some superb players. I mean, Devon Surfontaine, scrum half for Province as well. And I mean, I think it was Tommy du Plessis used to play for Northern Transvaal. Once again, every time I can think of a Province player, I can think of a Northern player that I didn't like because, as I say, I was so passionate in those days about Western Province. And I think for me, it's something that, if you ask me now, just to touch on the betting angle, if there's one regret I have about betting, and I love sports betting, so I'm the first to say it's like anything, it's like drinking or whatever. Some people can't control it, and it's not for everybody. Over the years, I've had my ups and downs, but generally speaking, when I've focused on it, I've done fairly well. But the one thing that happened to me when I started really getting into my sports betting was I lost that provincial love, if you want to call it that, even that to a degree a national. And that's sometimes a little bit, that's the sad side of it in a way, is the sense that I no longer have that passion for Western Province or the Stormers that I used to. And people who don't bet will say, well, you've sold out or whatever. But it's just one of those things. If you're betting and your aim in betting is to make money, the reality is, even if it's your team playing, you've got to make a decision. I'm either not betting, which a lot of guys do, or alternatively, I'll go against my team. And that's something hard. And the spin-off of that, actually, which is quite interesting, is my son has grown up without that identity that I had. I grew up with a Western Province dad, and I became a Western Province supporter. My son, on the other hand, sees his dad shouting for a different team every weekend. So he doesn't have that identity, and that goes across the sporting codes. I mean, soccer, whatever, although I'm mainly a rugby punter. But there is that side of the sports betting, which is unfortunate. The positive thing is, though, is on a Friday night, the Falcons can be playing the Leopards somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and no one else will give a damn about the game, and I can find it the game of the season because I have a lot of money riding on it. So that's the positive side of the betting. But I'd say for me there was a definite swing. There was a definite swing sort of at the end of the 90s where my focus started going more towards betting, and I became less provincialized or whatever. It was less about Western Province, and it was more. And there's an element of me that's upset about that. That's a little bit sad about that, because there was nothing better than cheering on your team. And I see it now
Yes.
with the Liverpool fans in England. I mean, they're obviously all sitting on the edge of their seats now to see what's going to happen. But, that when your team, you've waited for them for 30 years to deliver something, whatever, and they deliver it, there's that feeling of camaraderie and togetherness, like the World Cup last year, for example. I mean, I watched that World Cup in my Bok jersey, and I enjoyed the win for them. But quite frankly, I would have made a lot of money if England had won that World Cup. You must know that.
Yeah, I remember.
You know what I'm saying. I thought England would win it. I was on them, but I was also on them from before the quarterfinals. I've made money on them against New Zealand. But there you feel that you sit there and everyone is getting like hammered afterwards, and you're sort of joining in. But you think to yourself, if I didn't bet, I'd be a hell of a lot happier now, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, sure, but think of the money that I would have won on the game. So that's kind of the downside of betting. But definitely for me, two sides to my growing up. Well, we're sort of pre-betting and post-betting.
And have you had the opportunity to travel around the world and attend games, or not really? I mean, you did mention the betting angle, which has kind of taken away that whole thing around the sport itself. So I'm assuming you're not really someone that's into going to the actual stadium. Really, you'll probably rather sit at home and enjoy it there.
Quite often, you're right. I mean, for example, in Super Rugby, I very seldom go watch a Super Rugby game, because there's normally 2 or 3 back-to-back games. And unless I'm going to a box where I can sit afterwards and watch the game, I'm immediately, when the one game finishes, I'm already concentrating on the next game. I want to watch it. Although I still enjoy going to the ground. I mean, my earliest memory, my dad took me to see France against the Springboks in like 1980 at Loftus. And as I say, it was weird. I can remember the score from that day, as if it was yesterday. And I do enjoy it. I haven't been to a World Cup, Jacques, and I would love to go to a World Cup. I would really, really enjoy going to a World Cup just for the atmosphere. I still love going to watch a game with guys. And unfortunately, a lot of my mates, the reality is most of them, we actually played a sort of an online poker thing the other day that we managed to set up. We had a guy in Dubai, a guy in Australia, a guy, they spread out around the world. So a lot of your old mates, I could say, I've moved on. So I don't go out to the pubs and that as often as I would have. Yeah. And also because I'm lazy, so often you think to yourself, just sit on the couch and watch. But I would love to go to a World Cup without a doubt. But no, the answer is no. I haven't been around the world to watch games, unfortunately.
So wherever you have been, is there a ground that like stands out for you, and any specific reason why, or not really?
Not really. I actually haven't been to that many. Funny enough, we were looking at Good for the Game this year. We were going to organize a group of guys to go down to Durban and watch a Super Rugby game, and just have a weekend. All guys can come from all around the country and hook up. And of course, that's fallen through now. But I would say, I did go to Newlands as a youngster, and even when I was back down there on holiday. But I was still very young, so I don't remember Newlands that well. And obviously been to most of my games have been at Ellis Park. Although I know there's mixed feelings on it, but I actually do enjoy Loftus quite a bit. Where a full Loftus to me is quite something, and I quite like the whole. Even now, I went last year with Gavin Cohen, also one of our punter mates who was up from Durban. And there's lots outside. There's all the bars and this and that, and it was quite, it was decent. But no, it's not something. As I say, my choice very often is to actually watch on TV.
Yes. And is there any like moment? I mean, you've watched a lot of rugby, obviously, because that's what you got to do to see whether your money is safe or not. So, I mean, was there ever? Let's split the question. Kind of like, I know you say with the betting angle, everything kind of disappears in. Like, you're not that into a team necessarily, but there was a time when you weren't in the betting scene. So like you said just now, pre and post betting, was there a moment that stands out for you that was like, wow, that it just sticks in your mind forever?
Yeah, there is. I would say one of the big moments for me, and I suppose you could argue it's probably more betting related, because it was France New Zealand in 2007. Quarterfinal, where France actually beat New Zealand, and I had pretty big money riding on South Africa to win that World Cup, and I was able to even get a decent price even after the game. One of the bookies was, I think, it's sort of sleeping. I mean, New Zealand were the best team in that World Cup without a doubt, but I had a good bet, and then the fact that France knocked them out, So I'll never forget that game. I was watching at a guy's 50th at the time. We were in like a crowded, we'd all gone to the pub and watching. That was magic. There was another game that I won't forget in a hurry. I think it was in 98. It was in Durban. It was a Tri-Nations test where South Africa came back from the dead against New Zealand to win. And it was a friend of mine getting married. So we went to the church at 3 o'clock or whatever, went through all of that. And we got there. While they were taking photos, someone said, a game's on in the pub. So the guys all moved to the pub and we started watching it. It was the game where Dalton scored, I think, Joost possibly. It was that great comeback. And Bobby Skinstad was instrumental. I think he may have scored a try as well. And what it did was, it was unbelievable because it was just such a great moment to come back and beat New Zealand like that. When we looked, I mean, I've watched replays of the game since, and I still think we're going to lose the game. Like, how did we come back? But I'll never forget, because the girls at first were all very upset that the guys are watching rugby now, with the wedding reception coming. But what it did do is it put everyone in such a good mood. We had the biggest party that night because we'd all watched South Africa come back and beat New Zealand. And it's memories like that
it was like a double celebration.
Yeah, exactly. And look, once again, a memory that South African fans will have, which I'll have very differently, was a '99 World Cup when England played South Africa. I think it was in the quarters as well. And Yanni de Beer kicked all those drop goals. Now, once again, I was on England. I liked England. I can't remember exactly the details, but I was watching with a bunch of my mates, and I was the only guy shouting home the English. And every time Yanni de Beer stuck a drop goal over, of course, they were like on top of me and pounding me. And it was one of those things I just had to accept that, it was beaten by a freak performance on the day. But those are the sort of memories. I mean, World Cups, they're special enough. I mean, the fact that they happen every 4 years and that they just makes them special enough that World Cup memories, still live in your mind. And I've got to touch on probably the memory I harp on the most, and I'm probably the best known for, is the 2011 Rugby World Cup. Because I decided about 2 years before the Rugby World Cup in 2011 that France were going to win it. And I started backing France, 9-1, 10-1. I started having doubles into them. The result is I stood to make a lot of money if France won. France had one of the worst World Cups you've ever seen. I mean, I can't remember who they nearly lost to. They battled their way through. They beat Wales 7-6 in the knockout game, but Wales were down to a red card. I think it was Warburton sent off after like 14 minutes. So they were shocking the whole way through. They started the final against New Zealand 18.5-point underdogs. And that was the most incredible game because I still say, and I was a big Craig Jabir fan, but I say Craig Jabir was not going to blow anything against those New Zealanders in that last 20 minutes. And I still felt France were robbed in that game. But that one, from a betting point of view, it wasn't my biggest loss because I had a nice price. But that one I would have had a really great win. And to have gone through all of that time and see them play so badly and then see them play their best game ever and then not win it, that actually broke my heart. I think I went about a month without a bet after that, which is a personal record.
Really?
Well, that's a pre-lockdown record, Lockdown was going to extend that.
And not a non-enforced, not betting there. But I mean, I think many people will agree with you that France was probably robbed in that final because, geez, they were just amazing and they probably should have won it. I was actually thinking about it the other day. I mean, that's the same World Cup. In fact, it was 2 days ago, I think, something popped up on Twitter, with all these rugby websites that are doing stuff on social media just to keep people entertained and that. And they asked a question in regards to what was like the worst World Cup or, Springbok memory or something. And I actually said that 2011 quarterfinal when Bryce Lawrence basically literally, I don't know if robbed is even a proper word. That was just the worst moment, I think, as a Springbok supporter, that for me that stands out a lot, and what would have happened if we had gone past that, because I mean we had a pretty decent team that year. I mean that was pretty much our 2007 core team was almost still there, and we weren't bad at all. I mean we got priced.
Yes. So look, that was one. I mean, people still talk about that one, as you say today. That was a shocking performance. I'll never forget Pocock crawling all over the ball and wrong side of the ruck. And I mean, Lawrence would just stand back there and do nothing. Every now and again, refs have that every now and again, refs have that poor performance where they're just not on the top of their game. I mean, Lawrence probably had a few more of them than most, but I must say, if I look at the modern game, Jacques, it's a brave man who becomes a referee, because the thing is, you look at a guy. I mean, if you look at with social media and that now, in the old days, if you had a bad game, maybe there was a column in the paper about it or something. Nowadays, you don't even have to have a bad game. You can actually have a good game, but someone on the other side is going to point out your errors that you made there.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to ref a game without an error. And I find what happens with refs as well, they go through a stage where they almost, if I could say in that purple patch, they're reffing well. And then they almost gets to the point where they start believing their own good press. And then they start getting overconfident, and then they go down. I mean, I look at to me, it's happened a bit with Nigel Owens, Craig Jabir even as well. They start becoming almost too familiar with the players on that. But it's not a job I would do for. Geez, I honestly want to say I watch a lot of water polo because my kids both play water polo. That's the only other job I'd say is reffing is as bad as rugby, because people are on you the whole time. And I mean, there, most of what happens is underwater. You can't even see it.
Yeah.
I would say that to be a ref, I mean, we need to treat the refs with a lot more respect. And I got my betting mate Gavin Cohen is known as Oracle Rugby. He can be quite a wild punter sometimes, and you know Gavin as well. And
I know Gavin.
He can be quite a wild punter sometimes. But the one thing that he does, which is good, he says, "I never complain about refs' decisions." He says some will go for you, some will go against you. You'll get a good ref, you'll get a bad ref. And he says if you can watch the game and not moan about the ref, and anyone who follows me on Twitter will know I moan a lot about the ref, but if you can watch the game and not moan about the ref, you're actually going to enjoy the game more. And I've subsequently tried to do that a bit, and he's 100% right. You're going to get some decisions that go for you, some that go against you, and moaning about the ref at the end of the day doesn't achieve anything.
It actually doesn't, and I know I've been on a few shows with Gavin, and I remember he used to grind us with that line. It's like, and I mean I'm quite big also on giving the ref stick. In fairness, I mean I don't think I'm someone that would just randomly blame a ref, but because nowadays it just seems like it's getting ludicrous some days. With most of the referees, I think if you had to pinpoint really, really, really good refs, like Nigel Owens, for instance. I mean, you mentioned that he went through a bit of a slump not too long ago. But at the end of the day, we can't, if you can mention 5 guys, if you can, on one hand, name refs that is in that caliber, it's hard to find these days. It's almost impossible. I don't know what the problem is, what the reasoning is. I know a lot of the guys say too many laws, this and that, blah, blah, blah. You know what? At the end of the day, the RB is not suddenly going to reset the law book, which probably would be a good thing, but it's not going to happen. I mean, I saw that even now during lockdown, there was some stuff being mentioned and that I haven't even had a look at it. I was quite surprised when I saw the article doing the round saying there's some new regulations and laws or stuff that's going to be implemented. So yeah, it's interesting, but we know it's all about the safety of the players, and that's mainly why a lot of the laws that have come in is there. Just on your betting career, if I can call it that. I know you said it's a hobby and that, but I mean, you've done it for so long. It's almost like a second job for you these days, because I mean, you've got shows about it. You love doing what you're doing, and I mean, obviously you enjoy it. But I'm sure with the good comes the bad, and I mean, just share some moments if you don't mind. You don't have to tell us how much money you've lost and stuff like that, but it would be quite nice to just give us a bit of an insight as to what the good and the bad about betting, if I can put it like that. I don't really know how to ask you that question.
Yeah, look, I mean, when I started betting, I just bet. Like, if I could say, I didn't have a budget or anything like that. I used to bet, and at the end of the year, if you asked me did I make money or lose money, I probably would tell you maybe I made or whatever, but I didn't actually know, And eventually, I think it was around about the time I started the website as well. I started taking it more seriously. I started keeping a spreadsheet. I never used to. Initially, I tracked every bet, and then all I did was, at one stage I held multiple accounts, probably 12 online bookmakers, because I always believed in getting the best price. And in those days, there was a lot more difference between the bookmakers. It was a lot, if I could say, easier to make money. You'd have more differences of opinion. These days, I mean, I was, for example, a cycling punter, and every now and again you'd find cycling prices where you could see the guy pricing up was pricing up, not understanding cycling. Whereas nowadays, if you look at cycling betting, they've got lumen, I would describe them as cycling actuaries who sit there and work out the odds. You very seldom get what I would call a value play anymore. And it was the same with rugby. You could get big differences between the different bookmakers. I'm also very much a total points punter or a team points punter.
Okay.
So I do bet on the handicaps and that, which is your most common bet. But for me, I like to look at the weather, the team style of play, who the ref is, and that sort of thing. And I often go high or low on points. And there's a lot of us punters who do that. And that's been my success. But yeah, I started keeping a record, and I could confidently say sort of 6 out of 8 years I made a profit. But I guess the thing that I would focus on, if you wanted to tell me maybe about some of my highs and lows, was spread betting. So spread betting is very different to fixed odds betting. Fixed odds betting, you stick 2,000 Rand on to win 1,800 Rand on a handicap bet, and you know you can lose 2 grand or win 1,800. A spread bet, you go 100 or 200 Rand per point on total points, or like something like that, sum total of the try scorer shirt numbers, which was one of my personal favorites. And there you could lose or win, say, 8 to 10,000 in a game. So that was the difference. And what happened was at one point I was heavily into my spread betting, and I was getting limited in South Africa because there was only 1 or 2 spread betting companies, and it was a bit of a mission to get bets on. So I eventually went as far as an offshore account to open one of the spread betting accounts overseas and fund it in pounds. And I did pretty well. I took over some pounds. I made it. I managed to bring some back. Things were going okay, and I'd built up quite a nice balance. And there was one weekend with the Sharks against the Rebels. It was probably about 5 years ago or so in Durban. And I decided I was going high, even though Durban, the humidity's normally want to go low. But I decided I was already on a bad run, and I went high on shirt numbers for whatever pounds, 30 pounds a point or whatever. And at halftime, the score was something like 3-3. There hadn't been a try, so I was already losing a lot. So instead of just sitting back and accepting my loss, I pressed. I went again, and I doubled my bets, and I flew in. And the game ended 9-9. There wasn't a try in the whole game. I can tell you that I lost. If I remember, the figure was about £4,000 or something. It was ridiculous. It was terrible. But I'd spent so long to build that up, and it was like. And then I just flattened out. I took like a year of spread betting. Then I went back and I made and lot. And the reality is, I mean, I have made a bit, but I haven't played in about a year either, because I also just it's pressure. When you start betting. Spread betting, it's like, as I say, someone's in a fixed odds bet, you've won or you've lost early. You can see it 20 minutes out or whatever. Yeah. But with a spread bet, if things are going badly, they can still get worse. And if things are going well, you're hoping they'll get better. And I had some real volatile rides. And one thing I would say to anyone interested in spread betting is, just think very carefully about it. It's great. It's fun. It can be so exciting, but it can be so dangerous. At least with a fixed odds bet, you know exactly what you're putting in. And certainly fixed odds, I've had my runs, and most of my worst days have been those days where you get 7 Super Rugby games in a row, starting at 5:30 on a Saturday morning. And you'll bet on the first one, and then you'll bet on the second one, and the third one. By the 4th or 5th game, when you're cranky, now you have a bit of a bad luck. You lose in the last minute, so you're getting bigger on the next. By the end of the day, you like shouting at your family. You know that's the downside of it. And one of the things I decided a few years ago, my kids are very active in sport, and I love to watch them play sport. But I used to, for example, go watch my son play rugby, and I was watching him, but I'd have a walker on, and I'd also have a big bet on like a New Zealand derby between the Chiefs and the Highlanders. So now I'm watching my son's game, but I'm also betting, and then you realize now you're losing money on the betting. So you're actually now flipping watching this, and you're watching the odds, and then you're trying to watch your son play. And I made a decision a couple of years ago. I said, listen, if you're sitting watching the game at home, bet. But if you can't watch the game and you're watching your kids' sport, then focus on your kids' sport. And that was the best decision I ever made, because what it's meant is that when I bet on less games now, and when I bet, I'm much more focused. I get more enjoyment out of it. And when I'm watching them play sport, I'm not having that distraction of, there's nothing worse than your kid's team and everyone's celebrating and you've just lost a few grand on a rugby game, So it was honestly the best decision I ever made, and I've stuck to it. And I don't, when I'm watching, if I don't have money on the game, I might be following it from a super brief perspective or something, but it's cool. I'm relaxed. But when you've got sometimes you'd have ridiculous sums riding on the game, and you're trying to enjoy it, and it just didn't work. And that was one of the best things. And I would certainly advise anyone, getting into betting and that to also, it's the whole thing. You've just got to bet, preferably with money that you can afford to lose. Well, definitely
Yes.
you should do that, and just don't try and bet on every game, because if you bet on every game, you probably will lose in the long run. You've got to pick your games, and when the game is right, go for it. But I've become very much. My friends used to joke I would bet on 2 flies crawling up a wall or whatever. I used to bet on anything that moved. These days, I very much have found my niche in rugby punting for me. If no other sport comes back, let rugby come back. I love betting on rugby.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually wanted to ask you. You mentioned Super Brew there. It's something I used to play until the end of last year, and then you mentioned earlier on how the betting influences your feeling towards provincialism or backing that one team. You kind of go cold on it, and I started experiencing that just by playing Super Brew, and I think I played Super Brew for 8 or 9 years, and I just came to a point sometime last year, and I said, you know what, that's it, I'm done. After the World Cup, I'm gonna give it a break, and I want to support sport for what it's supposed to be. Because it's exactly the same thing. And that brings me to a question that I just thought of now. You mentioned that you play Super Brew as well. And obviously, for those that don't know, Super Brew is a prediction game online. It doesn't cost you money, but you can make your own pools and stuff. And a lot of the guys play against each other, friends and stuff. And a lot of the guys put money into a pool where someone either wins all of it at the end of the season or it gets divided, whatever the case may be. Something that I just thought of now when you mentioned betting and Super Brew in the same line was, is your betting predictions or punts that you make, do they ever differ from your Super Brew predictions?
It's an interesting question. I tell you, Super Brew, a lot of my punter mates will tell you a good punter is not necessarily a good Super Brew player. And my most success I've had, so first of all, I do exactly that. I run a pool. We got about 70 guys this year in Super Rugby, 500 Rand each. There's like 35 grand in the pool. Wow. Top 6 pay. So the first prize is decent. It's about 17,000. Of course, we're all waiting. Very interesting to see what happens now. But what I find with Super Brew is, Super Brew, so if I'm a rugby punter and I look at the game, and let's just say it's the Crusaders against the Blues, and the Crusaders are favourites by 7.5 points. And I fancy the Blues to come within that 7.5 points. So my handicap bet will be the Blues. Yeah. Now, the problem is with Super Brew, I look at that and I go, okay, I should in theory still go Crusaders is still a big favourite, go with them to win. But now you're watching the game, and I know it sounds stupid. I can have thousands riding on a rugby game. But sometimes I'm pulling more for my Super Brew. I mean, it's crazy. But you're thinking to yourself, shit, man, I don't want to. But here you've got a situation is now you've gone Crusaders and you've gone Blues. Now you need the Blues to only lose by 6 or more. But now they can't beat the Crusaders because you'll win your bet, but you'll lose your Super Brew. So what tends to happen is you tend to then go for the Blues to win the game, because that way you can watch it and you can just shout for the Blues. But what obviously then is happening is, in the long run, you're gonna probably lose because you're now going against it. And my best Super Brew seasons I've had is things like the Pro 14, where I've also played some small money pools with guys, and I've won it a couple of years in a row, where I've actually just let the betting dictate my. In other words, I'm not that interested in it. So I'll look at the odds each week, and I'll basically almost go somewhere within 5 points of where the bookies are. And it's there I've done pretty well. But the moment I've got my own opinion on the game, then betting and Super Brew don't go well together. And Hendrik Swart is one of our big punters on our side. I've known him for years, never met him, but also through our forum and that. And he's a good punter. And he always says he's donating the 500 Rand to Super Brew because he says he just knows he's not a Super Brew player. So it is very different. I always say Super Brews, the fact that a guy will put money into a Super Brew pool tells me he's got like a propensity for betting. So in other words, he's probably, if I spend enough time with him, I'd probably get him to bet as well. But it is very, very different. And a good punter, a good better is not necessarily a good Super Brew player. In fact, I'd probably generally say the opposite. I'd say the more you bet, probably the worse you're going to do at Super Brew. And I must say, I always assumed you were a Super Brew player from your name at Yellow Cap as well.
Well, it is where the name came from. It is You're not far off there. It is really where the name did come from. I mean, the whole concept of the yellow cap. For those that are obviously are familiar with Super Brew, that is where the name derived from, basically. Something else that I thought of just now, I actually forgot now, man. There was something I wanted to ask you, also on the betting scene. Just out of interest, what was your best or your biggest, your best bet ever that you obviously came off winning?
I don't remember the full details, but I've had some really good weekends and some really bad weekends in my time. But it does revolve around spread betting. And there was one game in Kimberley once between Griquas and Western Province. I think it was. I love the Curry Cup. I got a great record in the Curry Cup because it's generally high scoring games and the prices are done overseas, and you can normally get some good value on the. I love it. If I had to choose one rugby tournament to bet on, it would be the Curry Cup. And this particular day, I remember being high on shirt numbers in the Western Province Griquas game. And it was just one of those perfect games. The substitutes came on. It's a bizarre bet, but you want subs to score because they got the higher shirt numbers. And it always takes a while for me to explain shirt numbers to a guy who's not necessarily a punter. But that game I really won. I absolutely cleaned up. I mean, Province ran off in the end. I think they won by a good few points. And I was on their shirt, and the substitutes came on and scored. And I remember that being one of my biggest ever sort of single game wins. My biggest ever loss was that Rebel Sharks game. That was without a doubt. And I've had some, but it's weird. I write a weekly article for the Citizen newspaper, like a betting blog type of thing. And it's weird, some of my fondest memories is also like the Nedbank Challenge. I had bets on Garcia when he won, I think he won 2001 and 2003. Jim Furyk I had. But in those days, and I'm going back 20 years, I used to have 1,000 or 2,000 on a golfer like Garcia at 6 or 8 to 1, and used to win. And that day that you won the money, and it really made like a difference to you, like you took your family on a holiday, or I bought a bicycle when Garcia won. And I wrote the article the other day. I said it's weird. I still bet because my other responsibilities have got so much heavier now. The cost of living has gone up so much. You've got bloody, now you own a house, you've got rates and taxes, this and that. I'll still, on the golf now, I'll still bet the same size bet that I was betting 20 years ago. So obviously, it's just because I can't afford to just go and, when you're young, you sort of, you don't have responsibility. If you have a bad weekend, you just don't eat for the next couple of weeks that much, and, you get your next paycheck and you go. But you can't afford to do that when you've got a family. So I tend to bet a lot smaller than I used to. Which is a one thing, and also, as I say, probably not betting as much. But the other thing that I've noticed is when you win, like in the days when I used to win money, it used to be like, right, as I say, let's take the friends out to dinner, or let's go here, let's go there. Now when I win and I withdraw money, it just disappears into like some abyss where all the money goes. You don't get that same feeling. I would probably have to win like a really big bet now to have it actually influence my life in any way. It's more like a book entry that just goes up and down in the background, and money comes in, and it's like, when I was younger, it was like, that's why I enjoy playing poker with my mates. We play sort of once a month poker game because that's cash. So we take cash, and if you have a good day, you come home with more cash, and that's proper money, if I can put it that way. The moment it goes into your bank account, it's debited off somewhere,
It doesn't go to any responsibility or something.
That's it.
Tell me, how was the lockdown? I mean, I know you say you haven't been betting or anything, but just your general overview of the betting scene during this lockdown period. What do you see?
It's tough.
Sorry.
Yeah, look, no, that's fine. It's really tough because, I've got good relationships with a lot of the bookmakers in the country because they advertise on our website and stuff like that. And I mean, we've gone to all of them now and said, look, we're not charging you advertising because we can't actually deliver a product at the moment. I mean, that's the reality. Our site has dried up, our traffic to virtually nothing, because there's just nothing to talk about. But you can imagine it from their point of view. I mean, a lot of these guys have got retail outlets that have obviously closed. You think of all the soccer betting that goes on. I mean, the guys that are there, like the bigger guys, some of them have got like what you call bet games now, where you can go bet on lotto numbers and you can bet on this. So there are things to bet on, and some people will do that. And eSports, betting on eSports has gone mad. But I just can't. I'm probably just in the wrong era. it's too late for me, I think,
Yeah.
to get into esports. So, but guys are betting on esports, so they're making it work. But I don't know if you had to say. I mean, if I think there'd be a lot of casualties in the bookmaker industry if this carries on much longer without sport. And also bear in mind, horse racing as well has also stopped at the moment. So there is talk about it coming back fairly soon. But, at the moment, I mean, guys, if you want to have a soccer bet, you're kind of betting on the Belarusian league, and if you want to, it really is tough. And I know the bookies are, because of they're also struggling because their online turnover is down. And I mean, like any business, they've got traders that they have to pay. They've got in their retail outlets, they've got cashiers. So like any business, it will really be it's been heavily impacted. And the longer this goes on, I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few sort of casualties at the end of the day, because it's like any other business. You need your turnover to keep your staff going.
On the whole thing of esports, and I mean betting, I don't know. I mean, like you just said, maybe you're just a bit old school in that regard. But I mean, just thinking of it now, you're kind of putting your hands in someone, or your money in someone's hands, literally. That's holding a remote control somewhere in the world, and
might be a 12-year-old for all you know as well.
I mean, I've seen with the Formula One, they've been having a lot of races and stuff where they actually have the actual drivers taking part. But I mean, it's one thing sitting in a car and another thing holding a game remote control. It's not the same thing at the end of the day. You could be the world's best driver, but it doesn't mean you're the world's best gamer. So I mean, I can imagine I wouldn't be putting money on esports too quickly either. I mean, it's just a bit of an unknown entity at this stage, I think, for your proper, like guys like you that's come a long way in the betting scene.
Yeah, it's difficult for someone like me to get into it. Like my son, for example, he's too young now, he's 15, but I mean, he's gaming this lockdown for him has just been, I mean, he's been going to bed at ridiculous hours playing Fortnite and this and that. Now, if he turned 18, 19, 20 and he started looking at it, he would immediately have a feel for what to bet on and, what games are best. But I just don't have that feel. And I don't have the, I'm not, yes, I miss betting and sport, but I don't miss it that much that I'm going to start studying up on esport. Whereas I think if I was in my 20s, for example, I'd probably go, hey, hold on, there's some other alternatives here. But as I say, I've just taken the view, take a break now. It hasn't been as bad as I thought so far. I've been quite busy work-wise and stuff like that on the fuel side and that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I have been busy, but yeah, I am really relishing some sport, and in particular, some rugby coming back.
Yes, man. Brent, thanks so much. It's been really nice to chat to you and just getting some insights on the betting world, and just also getting to know your love for rugby on the other side of things as well. I mean, I've known you for a while now, so I mean, yeah, thank you for sharing your time and your stories with us, and just giving us some insights, as I've mentioned.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Jacques, and keep going with the good work. And I mean, I know you on the East Rand, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So I'm on the other side, sort of Rampart Ridge area. But yeah, I mean, we don't live that far apart. So after this lockdown, we'll definitely have to watch a game together or grab a beer.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure we'll definitely catch up eventually. I mean, we live too close. It's not like you're living in Cape Town or Durban, So I mean,
exactly.
We'll definitely find a way of meeting. Brent, if you wanna just give some, everybody can see your Twitter handle, obviously. You wanna mention your websites that you have and shows that you do, if people wanna maybe get in touch with you?
Yeah, excellent. Look, my website is goodforthegame.co.za. If you go there now, the site's up and running. You'll see links to a few of our YouTube videos. There's not a lot going on, like I said, at the moment. And then like you, I've also got a YouTube channel, also good for the game, but focusing very much on the rugby betting side of things. We do have a Monday night show, which is on hold at the moment, where we talk about rugby, use it or lose it. And then we got the handicap Rugby Chat That Matters. That's our flagship show on a Thursday night at 9 o'clock. But obviously it's on hold at the moment because there are no weekend handicaps. But that's a show that I'm passionate about and I really enjoy, because what it is we get 3 or 4 rugby punters looking at the weekend's betting. And what I find with that, I mean, like the show you and I are doing now, yes, you can have a live audience on some of the shows, but ultimately the show can be watched for many months or years to come. Someone could stumble upon it. That show's got a short lifespan. Essentially, it's like 24 hours. And that's for that reason we get a lot of live interaction, because if one of our shrewder punters spots something on the show, within 2 hours that value's gone. You could watch it on the Friday morning and you've missed the boat. And that's very exciting for me. And I love this whole YouTube thing. I think technology is great. The fact that you and I can have a chat now, and if we wanted to, we could link in with other guys and that. I think it's absolutely great. But essentially, if you look for Good for the Game, you'll find me. Alternatively, get hold of me on Twitter. That will be great.
Yeah, I know you've been doing a few odd stuff on YouTube now during the lockdown, where you're just having chats to other people. I mean, you had a lucky chat the other night with Barney Gurnham,
Yes.
which we will be having on I think I'm not sure now if it's next week or the week after, but I mean that was quite an interesting show. I mean, I was actually having dinner and when the show was on, so it was quite fun to just sit and watch that and getting to know. I mean, you talking to people that are moving in circles that you're more familiar with, and interesting topics that you guys touch on during this time. So at least you've got something that you can do as well during this time. It's not all dead and gone, until further notice.
Yeah, I mean, the main focus of our shows is betting stories, which is obviously quite unique to us. And I mean, for punters, we always love to hear stories about betting. Barney's, the one we did the other night, was a little bit different because Barney does bet a bit, but he's more of a, Barney's one of the most, he's got so much pride in this country. It's unbelievable. I used to go on a show with him and Gary Lenton and Neil Andrews on a betting world show on a Saturday mornings on Teletron.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when I met Barney. And I mean, he's just so passionate about South Africa. But he's also a guy who's got, because he's in the sports agency business, he's got so many connections. I mean, you see him, he's playing golf with KP and this and that. And he's just got so many stories. He's got a wealth of stories and an excellent guy. You'll love chatting to him on your show. But generally, that'll be great. Generally, our focus is we've accepted we're sort of like a niche market, and we focus mainly on the betting element, and that's where my passion lies more than anything else. But listen, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it, and we'll continue to promote it. We'll continue to promote each other's shows. It'll be great.
No, thank you so much, and thanks for all your support. Over the last year, that you've involved me with your shows and stuff. That's really, it's really nice, and I mean, giving us a chance to rant and rave sometimes. For me, it's probably more ranting than raving the last couple of months. But in a way, thankfully, Super Rugby has gone dead for now. So the heart's been good, and no uncalled for emotions that need to be put out there. But Brent, thank you once again. Please, people, give Brent a follow on Twitter, and you'll know whenever he's up to something or if he's going to be interviewing anybody. And then when life gets back to normal again, then give your shows a follow as well. I mean, there's some really quality stuff there, and the guests that you have on your shows are just as good as well. I mean, a lot of guys with a lot of insight, and part of the reason why I'm doing stuff like this, to get to know these kind of people and so show the world that it's not just about wearing a Springbok blazer and getting onto TV because you were a Springbok. There's people out there that knows even more than some of those guys. Anyway, Brent, have a nice evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe, man.
Cheers, man. Thanks a lot. Cheers.